What's up, everybody? Welcome back to a brand new video. And in today's video, I'm very excited because I have a very special guest with me today. His name is Elliot Deutsch. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And Elliot, I found on YouTube a couple of weeks ago. I was looking up I think it was on Facebook, and I saw one of Elliot's posts talking about a big band arranging video. So Elliot is a composer, arranger in LA, and he does a lot of arranging for his own big band, and I guess maybe for other artists as well. But he's done a lot of stuff in the industry, and I'm just really excited to have a chance to chat with him because if you guys know my music, which you should if you're following this channel, then you know I love my jazz a little bit here and there, and doing some big band stuff. So it's really nice to see, you know, someone taking their reins and really filling in kind of that niche that's kind of been there for a little while. There's been a lack of, you know, big band arrangement tutorials and stuff like that. So Elliot's really taking the reins there. So I'm really excited to have him on board today. So yeah, welcome Elliot. Thanks for being here. And I'd love to, you know, maybe if you could share a little bit about your background, starting out, like how you grew up with music, how you got into arranging, you know, how you started your band, all that. And yeah, we can go from there.
How much time have we got?
Oh no,
no,
as much
no,
as
it's all good. So yeah, so a little bit of background on me. First, I'm Elliot Deutsch. If we haven't, if you're not familiar with my stuff, it's good to meet you. I grew up in Los Angeles. I still live in Los Angeles. You know, born and raised, and there's an incredible music scene down here. I got into playing trumpet when I was a kid. Both my grandfather and my father both played trumpet when they were in school. So yeah, I got into trumpet. I didn't really do it for myself until I was in high school because I went to a smaller school, but in high school we had a band, and I was, because I had been playing for so long, I was, immediately like one of the stronger players, and it was, all of a sudden I had like a bunch of friends that played music, and we could play music together, and all that's great. I didn't get into writing jazz until I was in graduate school. I had already done a little, I developed as a trumpet player through college, and then I did a couple of tours, and, everything's going well. I decided to go back and get my master's degree in jazz studies. I was studying at Cal State Long Beach. And while I was there, I had to take a big band arranging class, and I wrote my first big band chart, and it was, like an eye-opening experience, man. Everybody in that class got to put their arrangement in front of the main jazz band, which I was playing in.
Right. That's
so
great.
actually
Yeah.
I had to get a sub for myself for that one rehearsal so that they could sit in the band while I was directing it.
Sure.
But we got to play the arrangement that I wrote, which is it's hilarious when I think about it. I did an arrangement of I Let a Song Go Out of My Heart, which is a Duke Ellington tune, which if you like put two and two together, it means the original is also a big band arrangement.
Right.
And I wrote like a standard big band arrangement of a big band arrangement, which it doesn't make a lot of sense artistically, but it was kind of like a really solid like proof of concept of like, I can write for an ensemble like this. And that kind of pushed me in that direction. I had my recital coming up, and we're talking about, this was in 2007 now. I had my master's recital coming up, and I thought I'd put together a big band where we could play that chart that I just wrote, and I'll write some more. This is a reason for me to write.
Yes.
We ended up playing my first 3 big band arrangements on that recital. And then I kind of hit the ground running. It didn't take long before I saw more opportunities opening up for me as a writer than as a trumpet player. Like I'm a good trumpet player. Like, don't get me wrong. I'd be happy to have me sitting in my trumpet section. But I mean, I was having, like I've, as a writer, I've written, I got to write like an arrangement that featured Arturo Sandoval, like, like all the best pros in LA, and Arturo's on it. And like, I would have never been asked to be in the trumpet section of something like that, but it totally made sense for me as a writer. So I think like it's one of those things I don't believe in talent just in general. And I don't know, we don't have to get deep into that, but it's getting a little wishy-washy. But like, I think that everybody, can learn to do anything, but like people have aptitude, right? Like some things come easier to certain people, and like we all have our own interests and things that make sense to us, right? And for me, what goes into like, you know, getting a really solid arrangement down made a lot more sense to me, I guess. It came a lot easier, certainly, than making music come out of my own instrument.
Interesting.
And so, I mean, since you're a composer, you might have gone through a very similar thing, but
Yeah, you know, it is interesting, and that's a really interesting story. But it brought up a couple thoughts. Like, yeah, for me, I was trained classically on piano from the age of 5, and yeah, that was really all I knew, you know. And I didn't even consider anything about writing music until I was in maybe middle school, high school. I had a couple friends, and one of them was a kind of a like a jazz pianist in a way. He would always go into the music room, always like play random stuff, improvisations. I'm like, oh, that sounds super cool. Like I never even thought about making my own music. Like, could I do that? And then my other friend was like a DJ, so he was doing remixes and all those things, and he kind of opened my eyes to like the electronic side of making music. And so I was like, you know, if you can make music and do it on the computer, like wouldn't that be so convenient? And that's kind of how I started songwriting and getting into that. And then, you know, listening to Michael Bublé's arrangements, he has some wonderful arrangers, Spicy G being one of them, and all of that kind of opened my eyes to the world of big band and jazz. And eventually that's how, you know, we connected. But yeah, I think just creating our own music and creating our own arrangements is such a fulfilling thing to do. And compared to I guess performing existing pieces of work. Whereas like for me, like that was like, it was okay, but you know, everyone's doing it, you know, and it's, it's not totally original. Right. And the bug that, and the feeling of just creating something and then having it performed and out there in the world, I don't think you can really match it. So I can totally see, you know, where you're coming from. But that actually brings up another question that I wanted to talk about later, but you talked about how you found more opportunities as a writer and, you know, arranger. So, yeah, like in general, for those types of gigs, like writing and arranging and all that, do you think it really is based on, like those connections of, you know, who you know and that type of thing, and how those opportunities come up, or is it more of just like, maybe there's just a lack of, like there's just less writers in general and less arrangers in general, so then there's just naturally going to be more work there. But, you know, I'm just curious as to like how these opportunities will naturally come up for, you know, writers and arrangers. How did you find that for yourself?
yeah, for me, like I didn't even start to get asked to write for other people until I had put out my first recording.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I think I did my, you know, as an artist, I think I recorded my first album too soon, right? Because like I'll listen back to it. It's called Weeknight Music. It's on like Spotify and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's good. It's a good record. But like some of the tracks feel like I hadn't really figured out arranging yet. Like to my ears now, right?
Yes.
And if I had waited like another maybe 1 or 2 years even, I would have been able to like replace those with stronger things, right? But you know, as you know, burgeoning professional in this, like there's no better calling card than like actual things they can hear. Like somebody, like meeting somebody on a gig and saying, "Hey, by the way, I write." Like that doesn't really mean anything. I mean, they know that you know, we get along and they like the way I play trumpet and all that stuff. But like writing is, I mean, anyone that's thinking about getting into writing, you have to think about, like, I don't know what rates are in other parts of the world, but I know in Los Angeles, like the very lowest end, like writing for a large ensemble is like around like $500 for a song. Like if you're just starting to write, that's kind of like a going rate. And it kind of goes up from there. Right. And like, even then that's a giant purchase, man. That's like, you know, that's like buying an iPad Pro or something. Right.
Sure.
Like totally. It's not one of those things that any like gigging singer or whatever can just sort of throw out into the world. Like, I'm just going to hire 20 people to each write an arrangement of this song, and then I'll just use my favorite one. Like each one is a considerable purchase. So like, you don't even get the opportunity until you've already convinced them that you're the one worth investing in. And they definitely think, they should be thinking of these arrangements as investments for the most part, because they'll end up performing them over and over again.
Yeah.
And it kind of defines their sound as an artist, right?
Right.
Um,
That's fair. Yeah.
so
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that. Yeah, I guess that also brings up the importance of just having a portfolio out there. Like, or if you're a film composer or something, then you need a demo reel, you need something to present. So it's funny you say that, your first album, you listen back and there's things that could be improved. But at the same time, if you waited, then you might have not gotten those exact same opportunities that you did then.
Right.
Absolutely, man. I mean, the world is a different place than it was. I mean, it's funny to think about, because when my mentors came up in like the 70s and 80s, where all the TV shows had like at least like a 15-piece orchestra. And like if you were like a happening big band writer, you were probably like writing the soundtrack to Columbo or something, right? Like there was work like that existed, and these people made a considerable amount of money doing it. And the world is not the same like that. But it still changed since I was in college, right? When I did my first album in 2009, right? And I'm trying to remember. I think we definitely released in 2009. We might have recorded it in 2008. Like there was no YouTube back then, right? And like I don't think there was even Spotify at that point, right? And so, and anything that you record, you're like releasing on a disc. And like people are buying a physical copy of it. Like just distributing was different. Like I definitely got it uploaded to like the iTunes store, where like people could buy it for like 99 cents a track or whatever. But the distribution was totally different. So like today, like if at the same place where I was, like at the point that we recorded that album, I had probably written like 11 big band arrangements or something like that. Like I didn't include all the ones that I had written at that point, but I included the best, like 75% of them.
Right.
And like, if I was doing a YouTube thing, or even just, you could release singles like worldwide easily.
Yes.
So it would be the very best of my arrangements at that point. Right.
Yes.
So like you have the advantage of being able to put out songs one at a time now. So as a developing artist, as long as you've gotten through the first like 5 or 6 stinkers or whatever, then those you're ready. Happen. Like start putting it out. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Better like just to do it than like done is better than perfect is.
Oh my gosh. One of my first thing whenever I meet like younger artists of any kind, honestly, they ask like, what's your advice? And my immediate advice is like, always be creating and like always be releasing is even better. Right. But like at least be creating. Yes. Like if you end up talking to someone that says like, what have you been working on lately? You have an answer for it. Right.
Yes, for sure.
Like,
for sure.
You just go like, I just wrote an arrangement of that Justin Bieber song and it's for 2 cello and we're going to play it at a wedding next week. Like you have something to talk about.
Yes.
Where if they go like, oh, you're a writer, what have you written? And you're like, well, when I was, 18, I wrote this thing. It's like, you're not really a writer.
Yeah, you're not.
So
what are you doing?
always be creating, whatever that means.
Love it. Yes.
And you know what? So, I mean, speaking about jazz in general, I think it's really beautiful that the musical landscape nowadays actually seems to be embracing jazz slowly, but if slowly and surely. It's even making its way into the mainstream, like with some funky stuff, with some hip hop, chords and all that. I'm not exactly as sure about the big band scene, but as like from what I've seen, it seems like there are more artists and arrangers doing that sort of thing, and Christmas albums are coming out with more big band arrangements and all that. So I mean the bands started to come out in like the 20s and 30s and all that, but what do you think gives them such like that classic magical sound, like for big band in general? And do you have any go-to techniques that you like to kind of achieve that cohesive like 2D type of magical sound yourself?
Good question. That is a huge question.
I know.
No, I mean, look, what we consider, we have to, I'm going to differentiate first. Like there's multiple, like the eras of big band is a big thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, big band didn't really come into its own, in my opinion, until like the 30s, right? Like things like, and things like Glenn Miller and Chick Webb and stuff like that. Like I know that there was a large ensemble before that, but that's not really big band. But like since then, like Glenn Miller doesn't sound anything like the Atomic Bassy, right? And the Atomic Bassy doesn't sound anything like Thad Jones, Mel Lewis, right? And Thad and Mel doesn't sound anything like Maria Schneider, which doesn't sound anything like Don Ellis, right? Like there's a huge thing. You know, I've got to take little they don't call them lessons, but I steal little lessons from some of LA's like best arrangers. I really, you know, I live in LA. There's a lot of really great writers that live here, and I've you know, done my best to corner them and be like, please give me a lesson. And they're like, I don't teach lessons. And then, but we'll hang out if you buy me coffee or whatever. And like, I got to hang out with Kim Richmond a couple of times I mean, I've hung out with Kim a lot, but with the specific purpose of like tearing apart some of my arrangements, like early on. And Kim's writing is so far different than the kind of writing that I'm trying to do. Right. Like he takes the jazz ensemble and uses it like a miniature wind ensemble. Right? Like his band usually has like a French horn in it, and you know, but then he also like uses a lot of woodwinds and makes these textures, and his things are through composed, and there may not even be an improvisation section in it. Like it's a totally different, his music's great. Like he's an accomplished composer. But he uses the ensemble in a very different way than I do. But you know, to get back to your question about about Christmas arrangements, I think that when people think of like the quintessential like Christmas big band sound, like what they're really thinking of is like that Sinatra sound, that like 50s and 60s like big band with strings underneath Frank Sinatra kind of a sound. And like that's a particular era, and there are particular this is a word that I learned from my teacher Jeff Jarvis when I was in college. He was another person I studied writing with. And he used to call these things cliches, like jazz cliches, but really it's the language of the kind of music that you're doing, right? So if I was writing a, you know, for lack of a better word, a period arrangement in like the Christmas, in like a Christmassy kind of Sinatra style, I'd do the full band tutti. I'd also do a lot of like perfect unison saxophone riffs, like underneath the singing. So, I mean, you know, let's hear the sleigh bells jingling to and then like have the trumpets and trombones going or something like that, right? Like you don't have to get too creative with it. Like I know that arrangement has been written before, like maybe not for that tune.
Yes.
But like those sounds are the sounds of that era of big band, and you should lean into them, right?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there's a beauty to also like the simplicity of the voicing styles, I think, too, of that time, right? Because like the more modern we get, the more out there we go, the more dissonance starts to come in, and the more the forms start to kind of blur the lines of, you know, what's traditional, what's not. So yeah, when I think of like quintessential big band, like you said, I think of, you know, the Count Basie stuff and how you know, Sammy Nestico arranged for his, you know, his group, and then just comparing that with what Chris Walden and Gordon Goodwin are doing now, their arrangements are like, some of the arrangements are still rooted in kind of like that classic sound, which is really beautiful. But you know, you also listen to some of the others, and they have these really complex voicings out there and really interesting ensemble combinations that I'm just like, oh, what are you doing there? But I have to say, like, for me personally, I just love like I love defined chords. So when you can hear chords with a hint of dissonance, with hint of those extensions in there, you know, those altered extensions, those are my personal favorite, because it has a classic sound rather than it being all the way out there. I don't know like what your preferred style is personally, but it just makes me the most happy when I hear that type of thing. So.
Absolutely. I mean, from like an orchestrational standpoint, I'm pretty traditional.
Right.
Like I found that in my own writing, like sticking to a technique when I choose what that technique's going to be, for at least for an entire passage, like gives the melody some amount of clarity.
Yes.
So like if I'm choosing to do like a closed voice 2D, right?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna stick to it.
Yes.
Right. Like I don't change voicings. I mean, every once in a while I'll do like an expanding thing where like, you know, we start with one thing and it kind of grows out both directions. Like the trumpets are going up, the trombones are going down, the saxophones are spreading out with both. Like I'll do that when I want that effect. But when I'm not going for that effect, I'll choose a voicing and then just stick to it like for 8 bars. Right. And for me, that brings a lot of clarity to it. And also, sort of to address the other thing, I try to keep consistency as far as like harmonic density, right? So I'll make a choice. Like if I'm doing like a really period thing, like it's supposed to sound like it's from the 40s, I'll make 4-note chords everywhere, right? So I won't include like a C9, right? C9 doesn't exist in 4-note chord land because there's 5 notes in it, right? C, E, G, B flat, D. But like I'll do a C7, and that means that the C will be in the middle of my voicing a lot of the time. Because then, you know, you have 4 instruments per section, you have 4 notes in the chord, you just use them. And then, but, and then I'll never, when I'm sticking to 4-note voicing, I'll never write like an F major 7 sharp 11, right? Because you know, then you're at a 6-note chord, or a 7-note chord if because you probably do a 13 sharp 11 in that case, right? And so where we you know, I'll try to stick to one amount of density for most of it until I hit like that turnaround where you really want that crunch to come through, and then you can increase that one chord by 1 or 2 notes, right?
So again, go ahead. Sorry.
But yeah, I've definitely like worked, you know, with some other arrangers that try to put as much density into every single chord. And to me, that kind of pulls away from the clarity of like what the lines are actually doing. But then on top of that, it also like some chords combined with some melody notes, right? You literally can't shove enough notes in. So you end up with like a really dense sounding melody going by. And then you have this one chord in the middle that, you know, just doesn't have the same density. Right. So like if you have a root in the melody, then you can't even put the 7th in your voicing. So that gets rid of that note. So you'll put like a 6th and then a 5th and a 3rd and maybe a 9th. And so you got a 4-note chord surrounded by like 6 and 7-note chords. And that sticks out in my ears when I listen back to it also. And that's kind of like a telltale thing to me for people that are like trying to squeeze too much harmonic information into a passage.
Right.
I don't know if I got way too technical. Sorry.
No. I was just going to say, like, as
a classical musician, that makes me feel a lot better. So. Because like when we're practicing our technical stuff, like our scales and our arpeggios and all that, we like the most complicated we get is like dominant 7ths, diminished 7ths, like arpeggios and broken chords and solid chords, you know. But we never really tackle the 9s, 11s, and 13s. So, but it feels like it comes back to like simplicity is always like it's never a bad thing, right? And if that's your intention and you want the harmonic clarity to come through, then it sounds like, you know, simple is better.
That said, you know, if you want to, God, I hate when YouTube people say this, but I've been watching so much YouTube. If you want to level up your jazz game, God,
we're not naming any names.
As if composing was a video game. If you want to level up your jazz game, the magic mushroom of jazz. So if you're going to use 5-note chords all the time, and if I'm writing for myself, I'm generally using 5-note chords as like my bass line, right? You're going to take all your major chords and make them into major 9s just by default. So if you're like, you know, arranging a tune and it says, you know, D major 7, just in your arrangement of it, just make it a D major 9 and write that on the piano part, you know, reflect it up top. And that can be used interchangeably with like a major 6/9, where you like instead of a major 7, you have a major 6. Depending on what your melody note is, one might work better than the other. But then I'll take my dominant chords, like, you know, because we have 3 major chord types, right? Major, dominant, minor, or major, minor, dominant. So the dominant chords, I'll also make them into a 9, right? So like if it says C7, I'll just change it into a C9 by default. And if you have a minor chord, I'll actually change that one into an 11 by default. So like a D minor, I'll make it a D minor 11.
Right.
And just, you know, for people that aren't as versed in jazz, when you make something into a minor 11, you generally skip the ninth in your voicing. So like a D minor 11 is going to be D, F, G, which is the 11th, A, C.
Right.
Yeah, as opposed to a D minor 9, they would have an E natural in it. To my ears, the 11th just sounds more neutral, I guess, than the E. Like it just adds a little bit of richness without changing the character of what the chord is. So I start with those and then only use the other kind of extensions when, you know, the music's asking me to, or whatever you want to call it.
Right. And just a quick note to our classical friends. The ninth is the same as the second, the 11th is the fourth, and the 13th is the sixth. just so we're clear. When I was first learning it, I'm like, wait, so I have to count 11 notes up from the root? Wait. And then I was just like, okay, wait. That's probably a little easier for me to remember it that way, you know?
Oh, want to blow your mind for a second?
Yeah, let's go.
So in jazz, if you use 13, that implies that there's a seventh under it.
Right.
So like if you write C13, that would mean like C, E, G, B flat, probably a D also, and an A. Whereas a C6 only implies the A. So like, while it's the same A, like the 13th is the same as the 6th, there's a lot of implication by it. At the same time, like using the number 9 implies that there's a 7th.
Right.
But if you use the number 2, like C2, that implies C, D, E, and G, but no 7th, no anything, you know.
Right.
Which is also a great chord, by the way. If I'm doing like modern R&B or gospel or even pop music a lot of the time, and I'm trying to sneak in a little bit of extra richness into like my string parts or something, what I'll do is I'll add the second but not the 7th, right? So if it says C major, I'll make it a C major 2, like by default, right? Yeah. Just to add that cool. Like little bit of hipness, but without adding like the jazz that the 7th, the major 7th or the major, like major 7 and major 6 sound like jazz, but like major 2, that just sounds like I don't know, Erykah Badu or something like that. It just adds some extra richness without putting a bunch of jazz nonsense over the top.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I mean, talking about strings, we had talked about Hollywood string writing before, and would you say that's kind of like a traditional technique used in like Hollywood music, or do you think there's like a specific style that is used for that type of music?
Well, so like when I'm talking, when I think of Hollywood strings, now I'm thinking of like the kind of strings that we'd put over that like Christmas Sinatra style thing, right?
Okay.
In that case, we're in jazz, so like I would just use the 7th.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but like I've written a handful of those things, and like it's, you know, as a jazz composer, like I really cherish the times I get to write for string players. And I've had a bunch in the last few years, but there were years and years where I was just writing for big bands. So I'm not quite as much of an expert when it comes to string writing, but like for that particular sound, I think I do a really good job. And basically, when you're writing, first of all, like most of those sessions don't use string bass at all in the string section. So like if you set up big band with strings and Sibelius, it's going to give you like a bunch of bass. It's going to give you 5 staves of strings. But you know what I do is I immediately delete the bottom one.
Yes.
Unless I'm going to write a passage where it's like just orchestra. Like if you're going to do like a big orchestral intro, then I'll use the basses.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And then I'll just have them tacit the rest of the song.
Right.
Because they end up competing with like the string bass from the jazz band.
Right. Yeah.
Who's going to be, you know, playing pizzicato or whatever you want to call it the whole time.
Yes.
Just plucking away, and you don't really want a bunch of melodic things going on in their same register. But like, as far as the rest of the section, like you just kind of like, again, we're going to, you know, talk about cliches for this. Like you want to kind of lean into them. So like what the sound of those is usually save the strings until the bridge and then have them come in with pads. And then when you eventually do melodies, you're probably going to do like first violins up in their high register with, you know, maybe second violins also just doubling them. And then you know, do Divisi violas and cellos, doing pads underneath. Like that's a really great sound.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So like, you know, those the same kind of things that you do, but a lot of it's just like keeping it really, really simple.
Yes. Simplicity.
In fact, there's like a great part in Sammy Nestico's book called The Complete Arranger where he talks. God, I just credited Sammy Nestico. I think this might have been in Don Sebesky's book. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Some arranger much greater than me. Basically, he talks about writing for strings, like, you know, and he's writing to jazz arrangers. Like, this is how you should think about it. String players are, first of all, they are excellent musicians and they spend a whole lifetime learning how to play their music, right? And they're like, but this kind of music they learn doesn't include swing eighth notes generally. And so it takes a long time to really learn how to do it. And I know there are a few handful of string players that really do a great job playing swing eighth notes. But if you're going to write passages for a studio orchestra, part of the style actually is avoiding having them ever play swing figures.
Right.
So you know, quarter notes, lots of quarter notes and half notes and whole notes.
Yes.
And then if you need them to move faster, just have them move faster than an eighth note. Like you can have them do eighth note triplets and that'll line up sort of with the swing eighth notes.
Yeah.
I would never write out swing as like quarter note, eighth note with like a triplet bar over it.
Sure.
Like, like them playing that, while it will line up, they're not going to inflect it.
Yes.
The same way.
It just speaks a lot better in the horns for sure.
Yeah.
Like
well, they spend in the same way that like string players spend, you know, years of their life learning how to play in an orchestra section, right? And play all the classics. Like the horn players spend years of their life learning how to play eighth notes correctly in the jazz idiom, right? It's a difficult thing. True. Yeah. It's really tough.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, like all of arranging, you're writing to each of the people's strengths so that it adds together into like a really amazing performance.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah. So like eighth note triplets are gonna work great on the strings, and then 16th notes. And if you want like a big crazy rip, then just do, you know, 30-second notes or you know, an 11 uplet. Like they do crazy tuplets on the string parts. I'm convinced, by the way, that when you see a crazy a tuplet in the string parts, like a bunch of 30-second notes, like an 11 on top, right. Yeah. What they really want is a bunch of cacophony.
Yeah.
Swooping up towards something.
Exactly. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But you see that in string parts all the time.
Right.
And you'll see different tuplets. You'll see like a 9 uplet in the first violins, and then an 11 tuplet in the second violins, and then, you know, a quintuplet down in the violas because you know their fingers don't move as fast or whatever, and then, you know, and then together it adds up to
exactly. Yeah. Yes. I mean, the string players are not going to count that. They know what to do. You know, right?
No. Well, that's a weird thing. Like you know, I'm sure you went to college for music, and a lot of people watching this probably are at least, you know, taking music education seriously, if not going to college themselves for music. You see a lot of people really sitting there like trying to get the perfect 11 tuplet within one beat and really counting it out and learning how to do it. And I just remember seeing them going, they don't really want it accurate.
Right.
The composer's intention is a bunch of nonsense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's great. Oh man, the beauty of notation.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, so yes, so that was a lot of arrangement technique stuff. So thanks, for that. That's great. Talking about how like the past couple of years have impacted everything. How have you, as an arranger, as a gigging musician, how has this personally affected you, and what kind of transition steps did you make to, I guess, keep the work coming and all of that? And how have you seen that, result wise in your life so far up to this point?
Absolutely. I mean, the pandemic kind of stopped everything, right? I know in LA, all the sessions were canceled, all the gigs were canceled.
Yeah.
And I mean, as a writer, I could write as much as ever during, sitting at home, because that's where I write anyway, right?
Yes.
But people aren't hiring you to write when they can't record and perform, right? So that work kind of dissolved too. And like most people, at least at the beginning of the pandemic, it's a difficult like mental health thing, right? Just kind of coming to terms with all the things you were doing being canceled, right? But pretty quickly, I saw there were a few different people starting to release these virtual performances, and like they were looking and sounding pretty good, like a fun project kind of thing. And I was like, I should do one of those. I have a big band and I write, and I've got these charts that I haven't recorded yet, and we should do this. And the biggest surprise to me, honestly, was just that it sounded so freaking good.
Yeah.
Like, I think one of the cheat codes, back to a video game thing.
Yes.
One of the cheat codes that I used was having a real engineer mix my music. I have an engineer, Jason Lee, who's been mixing all my projects for years now. And when I decided to do this, he was one of the first people I called, and I was like, would you be interested if a bunch of people recorded in their home studios mixing it? And he's like, well, as long as there aren't tons of edits, I'd be happy.
Yeah.
But I mean, the players that I use in my band are also great on their own. Like they kind of understand how to put a perfect performance of their own part together.
Right.
And I was receiving all the parts from everybody and stacking them into Logic on my computer, and it sounded okay. Right. Like it was tight, but not really convincing as a performance.
Yes.
And then I had Jason go through it, and he re-EQ'd everybody. And he does this technique where he, I don't think he invented this, so I'm not afraid of giving it away, but he basically puts two reverbs on everything. He does a really short reverb that's almost inaudible, that kind of tricks your ears into feeling like they might have been recorded in the same room.
Right.
And then the big reverb that you're kind of used to hearing added to studio recordings. And I think his big reverb is modeled on the chambers at Capitol, but I think you can just buy that one. And he's like modified it the way he likes it. So, I mean, he's kind of showed me how to mix these things, because I've been mixing my own demos for my lessons that I put together on the channel. But like when we do the actual songs, he's mixing it, and his mixes sound so much better than mine.
Well, I mean, he's a
he's a professional. He's a professional.
Sure.
And then honestly, like a few songs in, a mastering engineer that I had met a few times, named Will Borza, reached out to me through Instagram and was like, do you want these things mastered? and I just reached back to him and I said, look, we're not really putting any money into this. This is just like a, friend's project thing.
Yeah.
If you want to do it, I'd love to have you master it. And he's like, yeah, send them over.
That's so beautiful. Awesome.
Yeah. So now they're mixed professionally and they're mastered professionally.
Love it.
There's a reason why they sound so good.
Awesome.
So that's like the big shock to me is how good it can sound. I don't think it sounds quite as good as when we took the band into Capitol.
Sure. Of course. Yeah.
But like, it sounds better than a lot of large ensemble recordings that I've heard.
Yeah.
And it sounds better than when we just set up like stereo mics in a room. Right. Which, like, the part that we're losing is everybody playing together in a room.
Yes.
Like, that's the part that I was so afraid would ruin the whole thing. Right?
Yeah.
And it's actually not been as bad as I thought.
Yes.
So like that's a big learning part.
Yes.
In terms of that.
Yeah. That's great.
Man, I went way off the chains with that one. I don't remember the original question. That was like part one of my answer.
Yeah, no. I was just asking like how, so what that sounds like that was the main transition you made from, I guess, in person to online.
Oh yeah.
And then the other channel and all that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, the other transition I made was literally announcing on my social media that I'm switching to pandemic rates.
Okay.
So it was like whatever I charged before, you could get it done for half. Right. So that the idea was to encourage people that want to get their books together.
Yes.
To just invest in this time when we're not earning as much money.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing a lot. So it's like whatever work I could get, I was happy to do it.
Sure.
And so that was really, really, that helped me get my plate, busy again.
That's good.
Yeah. But as far as the YouTube channel, man, it's been a slog. I like anyone that puts out music, it's difficult mentally to like put out music and then not have a lot of people listening to it.
Oh, sure.
Do you know what I mean? And like,
Absolutely.
I feel like the music that I'm writing and recording is really, really good. Like I listen to a lot of big band music. I know that I'm biased when I'm talking about my own music, right?
Sure.
But you know, at the same time, I can objectively point to these things. Like it's written really well and consistently, and we've got all, like I'm not playing trumpet on it, and the trumpets sound amazing, and like all that kind of like I know that it's good, but I also know that it's like it's tough to get people to listen to new sounds, new music that they don't know. Like if I was in, you know, for lack of a better way to put it, if I'm like arranging popular songs that people already know, that's kind of a way in, right? But at the same time, it's difficult to release that stuff like legally.
Yes.
And so there's a trade-off. And so my last couple of projects, I was doing like full original stuff, and it was difficult to get people to hear it, and not because it wasn't any good, but just because nobody knows who I am. And so like during the pandemic, I really focused on getting the YouTube together because I feel like that's a way to get the word out.
Absolutely.
And in addition to putting out our music, I started making like little tutorials. And, you know, like the ones that started to hit, for lack of a better word, are when I'm talking about how to arrange. It's so obvious. Like I should have just like, this is what I do. Like this is what I do. But my first tutorials were like, here's how you record on your home computer.
Right.
And like, where I'm like a super novice at that. Right. But like the big band arranging stuff I've been doing for years. Right. And I've got like a reputation in town, and I've a bunch of clients, and they're people I've worked with, and and so of course when I start talking about this stuff, people care, but it seems obvious now, but those like how to write for big band tutorials are bringing a lot more eyes to the channel, and hopefully in turn get a lot more people listening to my music.
Yeah, I mean that's a big bonus, and that's the thing about organic traffic is it is like you will always have people who are like the super fans, right? The people who will watch every single video no matter what it is, support you however they can, and I think it's just a percentage thing. Like the more audience you get, the more fans you'll get naturally, and that's the upside to all of that, which is great. So yeah, just in conclusion, like for people who are maybe aspiring composers, arrangers, in this day and age, especially in this climate, do you have any recommendations on maybe how to get started, the importance of maybe putting yourself out there, and what's like a good way to do that?
Yeah, I mean, the first, man, if you're going to get into composing and arranging, the first thing I would say is, I mean, I'm a big proponent of writing for like musicians, and I know that writing what inside the box, like on the workstation in Logic and Pro Tools, is like an important part of what we do now, and it's important to be good at it, and a lot of work uses that. But I think as you're developing early on, like taking sheet music and putting it in front of actual musicians, you get an immediacy as to what works and doesn't work, right? And so I think if you're trying to get into writing, like if you're like a French horn player and a trombonist and a tuba player and two trumpets, like write for brass quintet.
Cool.
Or put together a woodwind quintet. I know French horn does both. But get an ensemble together, even if it's like once a month, and try to write something new for it each time you meet.
Cool.
And then as far as getting your work out there, when you do that, bring a little Zoom recorder with you, and like set your smartphone up on a tripod and get your Zoom recorder out there and just record it and chuck it on YouTube or chuck it on Facebook. If it sounds good and you're proud of it, other people will enjoy it too.
Right. I can definitely see that. And what's interesting, I think the thing that separates a lot of people from the people who actually get noticed is that the people who actually, or the people whose work is most appreciated, are the people who provide value to other people, because everyone shares their own music, right? And whatever. But if you can actually find a way to impact other people, whether that's through education like we're doing, or if it's, I don't know, like writing an arrangement for somebody and they really, really enjoy it, then it just has this positive impact on them, and then in turn they'll naturally want to support you in a certain way. And I think you're starting to see the fruits of that, thankfully, through the channel, which is really nice. I mean, that's how I found you. And
so Yeah.
Not to be dire, but man, it's kicking up now. It feels good.
Yes.
And the numbers are going up. I'm getting a lot
Exactly.
of people reaching out to me, and it's a really wonderful thing.
It is. Yeah. And the power of online for sure. Like, so I'm using my channel as kind of a, not only an education platform, but also to share my music as well. And I know I wouldn't have like a fraction of the comments and, you know, views that I have if I didn't start when I did and stayed consistent. And consistency is so key when we're putting ourselves out there. Because if we just put one thing, really good thing out there and then drop off the face of the earth, then no one's gonna remember us, you know? So, but anyway. Well, Elliot, thank you so very much for being with me here, and I hope everyone watching, you got something out of it. Elliot, is there like maybe you can share your channel with us? Is it like just your name, and where else can we find you?
Yeah, find my channel. It's Pandemonium Big Band. It's the name of my ensemble, and that's the name of the channel. Yeah, thank you. And it used to be Elliot Deutsch is the name of my channel.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we put out our first video during the pandemic, and I thought, oh, let's just call it the Pandemonium Big Band now.
Yeah. That's great.
You know, because I didn't know whether that was now we've done 10 of these things, and we've got, you know, an 11th one that's almost done, and
exactly.
Yeah, you know, where it's a new ensemble. It's the Pandemonium Big Band. So that's the name of the channel. Also follow me on Instagram. It's also Pandemonium Big Band.
There you go.
I'd say follow me on Twitter, but Twitter's useless. So
yeah,
I can't figure that thing out, man.
Well, it's different. Like if you want to get a company's attention, Twitter's a good place.
Oh man, I do want to get companies' attention. Yeah. Send me free microphones, please.
Oh, there you go.
Man, all the microphone companies watching this. I'm recording my stuff on this Shure 57.
There you go.
Nonsense. Unless it's Shure, then this is the best one. Pay me money.
Go. Love it. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So
yeah, if anyone watching is interested in like jazz arranging, big band arranging in general, definitely check out Elliot's stuff. He has it's mainly catered to beginner intermediate musicians, I think, or arrangers who are just getting into it, want a refresher on things, and want to get up and running. So some good foundational material there, and it sounds like Elliot's working on some stuff that is more for the intermediate advanced arranger coming out very soon. So he's doing a lot. Yeah. Great. All right. Thanks so much, Elliot. I'll catch you very soon. And for everyone watching, thanks again. Talk soon. Bye, everybody.